Okay, today is the November 27th policy subcommittee meeting. Can we start with attendance, go around the room and say who's here? Rob, we'll start with you.
Rob Mezzanotte, Assistant Superintendent.
Andrew Hennius, attorney for the committee.
Erin Earl, School Committee Chair.
Kenny Dubas, Superintendent.
Jennifer Lima, school committee member. Next on the just citizens' comments. Does not appear that we have anybody here. Did everybody have a chance to review the minutes from our last meeting on November 9th?
Mm-hmm.
Can I get a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting of November 9th. Right?
Second? All right, just clarification, the voting members are myself, Dr. Duba, Dr. Earl, and Rob Mezzanotte. So all in favor? Aye. Okay, none opposed. Okay, we've got basically 3 policies on the agenda this evening. Drug and alcohol use, teen dating violence, and transgender gender nonconforming.
Jen, just a question, is the door open? Just for,
It is.
Okay,
Yep.
I can do that one.
great.
And we have a hard stop because there's another meeting this evening. Dr. Duba, do you have a preference on which order we go in?
No, it doesn't matter. I know that the drug and alcohol and the teen dating both have red lines that we've been working off of, and they have some comments on them for us to
Okay.
go through.
So you want to just go in
we can start
order?
with the drug and alcohol is the first one.
Jen, just a clarifying one, I know some of these are like regulated by
They all are.
other, okay.
Yeah.
But is any like more timely than others because of that?
Because of the
Right annual
Yeah.
health report. They're all part of that.
No, I mean,
It's all the same thing, right?
Yeah.
But
both of them are redlined, and we probably could go through comments on both of them, and
yeah,
hopefully
that's
get
fine, I
those
just wasn't, yeah.
Yeah, so
Let's
we'll
try.
just start
Alright,
and
to
we'll go
a future
in order.
school committee meeting.
So we'll start with the JICH red line. So what I had done, because we had talked at the last one, we had the JICH and then we had the regulation. So basically what I did was I dumped them together because there was some conflicting information in the two. So I put them together to see what needed to stick and what didn't. And I know, Kenny, you had gone through and made
Yeah, I
some.
made some comments and added some language in the comment sections. I don't want to just like add it into the document itself.
Yep, so I figured that might be a good place to start was with your comments.
How many, like, one more sentence there? JICH,
Go
Ken's
into-
comments, or do you want the Rs?
Go into the one that says JICH, drug and alcohol use, JSL red line 1023,
Okay.
because that's got Ken's comments as comments.
Okay, that makes sense. JICH. The date you said was 10/23?
1023,
Oh,
yeah,
I see
and then
it,
to
yeah.
the right it says last modified 1026
Got
by
it, got it.
Andrew.
Got it. Thank you.
So under the policy statement, I had put a little question because the current policy says, the above referenced state law, and I had kind of just put a question, which one, and Ken had put a note, because above it referenced a couple state laws, and Ken had put a note which one he thinks it would be referenced to. There, I just think we should note which one it's being referenced, instead of just saying state
Mhm.
law, I think we should put the one that it's referenced to. And then kind of looks like you changed the intent of the policy to be or you're putting the notes over there to what you think the intent of the policy should be.
For which, under the next one,
Yeah. That blurb right there.
yes, that was for, because under the intent of the policy, number 2 says intervene when student use is detected. And I think you might have put the question there, or someone put add
Yeah, I
something.
put something about adding
So I just
support.
added, I just put a sentence says, when it is learned that a student is using any form of alcohol or drug use, appropriate professionals will intervene by providing support to the student through the means of education on substance abuse, counseling, and/or services in mental health, and coordination of family support and services.
Okay, so now this whole thing that's in blue here, this is what was in JICH, and I just dumped that all in there. So that, I don't know how much of that needs to stay, should stay, wants to stay.
Can you clarify that, Jen?
So the existing policy is in white.
Yep. And
The
then
red is,
from red is edits on that. Yep.
red is edits on that,
And
and
then-
blue is what was dumped in from JICHR.
Got it.
Regulation.
So when I read through that, 'cause I know we had talked about keeping the administrative regulations separate from the procedure, but you had also said that there was some conflicting language
Right.
that was back and forth.
Yep.
So then when I was reading this, I was like, well, what should come out, what should stay? And I'm gonna be really honest, after reading it all, I was like, maybe it just stays there.
Right, and so that
Just-
was kind of my
It makes it
question,
lengthy,
right.
but I was like, maybe we just keep it all there.
Look, consensus from the two of you.
And then, but.
Yeah, like that's okay. So
No,
I,
I
yeah.
just was like.
Yeah, like it's hard to
when you
draw
pull
the
out
line of
pull out,
like,
And it's all good information, so that maybe we just leave it there as reference in the policy, so as we're using the policy, administrators are referencing it, it's.
I think like where I had questions was like the current policy as it stands for JICH is overseeing athletes' behavior off campus. And I'm not advocating for or against, but it says the policy is in effect when on school property, school functions or activities, as well as off school property. This policy is in effect year-round. And then my notes around that are in purple. This is the major difference between JICH and JICHR. Athletes can be disciplined for using drugs or alcohol outside of school functions. And then I see your note is, I'm not unsure of how we control what happens off school grounds and events not sponsored by the school. This is not a practical enforcement. So that's like a philosophical difference. So I guess my question is, like, which one is it? Because if we're going to change the policy, we need to pull that out. If we're going to keep it, we need to keep it in.
where are you?
I was just asking, because I'm trying to find where.
It's
You had me until expectations. I was reading those.
it's under D, policy expectations for all students on and off school property.
I would make a note, anytime it says guidance counselors, I'm pretty sure
Pages.
the preferred language is school counselors now.
Okay.
Yeah.
What page is it? I think it's on. I can't find.
I don't know if that's.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
I don't have page numbers.
Let me scroll on the side, does it show you the page?
I got
10.
it. It's on page.
Thank you.
Did you say school counselors instead of guidance
Yeah,
counselors?
school
Yeah.
counselors,
Okay.
yeah.
So you're under D, right?
Yep.
And where's the specific line? Is that what's highlighted in?
It's the one right before F.
On page 10, you said?
Yeah, and actually includes F as well, I guess.
So it's the language around being off school grounds, that's
Yeah.
what we're,
Basically, the way JICH is currently
Page
written,
10,
and
scroll
this
to
is
9.
like
Oh,
specifically
yeah,
for student athletes. The current
Mhm.
policy says if you're a student athlete, you're saying you're not gonna do illicit drugs or consume alcohol, period.
Period.
Like, it doesn't matter whether you're on a school event or off a school event. And if you are at a party where there is drugs or alcohol, you're leaving. And
Mhm.
if you are found to be at a party where there is, regardless of whether or not you're partaking, you can still have punishment in terms of your athletic,
Correct.
like, not suspension,
Right.
but
Athletic status.
athletic
Yep,
status.
Yep.
And that's what the current policy says.
On what? Is it under discipline in the current JICHR?
It's under JICH. Under H, violations and consequences. For a first violation, an athlete will be suspended for the next 2 scheduled.
Wait, stop. What page
8.
of the current policy? Like, not the drafted like, I was looking at the actual real
Actual, oh,
old.
I don't know, I don't have that printed.
Okay, hold on. All right, I'm on page 8.
It's violations, consequences.
So in the regulations, it talks about suspension.
Right, and that's where there was a disconnect. It feels to me, just feeling like JICH with no R was for athletes, and JICHR was for
I think all students.
all students, and dealt with more like what happened on school property, and JICH dealt with what happened.
Yeah, but that's literally not, that's not supposed to be like that.
I know, that's what it,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
the way
yeah,
it reads, yeah.
And I think we had talked about this at some point, that we think that maybe they had taken an existing policy that had lived about student athlete, drug use, et cetera, and modified it when the new law, like when they had to modify it to the chemical, whatever.
Yeah.
And so back to the point about like why it would say all year round. So like, I guess the question is kind of like what Ken was talking about as far as the enforcement, but then also like, what do you do if that doesn't exist there, right? Like you take that out, like, and then the entire whatever team does whatever in July, like, does that not exist in the world, you know, as far as like their participation, et cetera? And
Right.
so like, I would definitely defer to Ken and Rob on that concept. You know, I could,
So
it's a tricky one in my
yeah, I
brain,
mean,
but.
I think having the athletic director comment on this would be a good thing too. Because I know that in my experience as a high school principal, this was something that the athletic directors were like primarily overseeing. So I'd be curious about that, just to know like the how this works at the ground level. You know what I mean?
Did share this already with
Or you-
Yeah.
him and, yeah,
we-
principals of the high school.
Did you
So-
share any feedback or?
So I thought I already went through that, like, made the,
Yeah.
so the response I got, and this came from Eric, this was Eric's response. Said, and I specifically asked about suspension and discipline. He said, when this happens with student athletes, and it really does, we suspend the student athlete from school, in school or out, apply the 30 extracurricular suspension, and communicate with Dave about the athletic suspension. It should also be noted that the student is always referred to the student assistance counselor for intervention.
Is that for an infraction that happens on campus?
I had asked if it, like, basically it's on, like,
Yeah.
if any type of situation, so.
I'd be curious with the off-campus one, only because, and this is just from my experience, most of the time when an off-campus incident happens, it comes from a third party.
Yep.
Who, either through a social media post or through a photo of some sort or whatever. And it's case by case, depending on the specifics.
I
You know what I
mean, you
mean?
can't suspend a student
No, not
for
for-
drinking off campus if it hasn't happened.
Athletics is different
You
because,
can,
yes.
and it has been enforced
Yep.
in athletics for
Yep.
an incident that's happened off campus, but you cannot suspend them from school.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that, to me, doesn't feel,
No, I would have a huge problem with suspending a kid from school for something that happened off campus, outside of school
Oh,
hours.
yeah.
Can't do that.
so I don't think I think that there are two different things here. It's an on-campus infraction and an off-campus infraction,
Right.
and how both of those are dealt with.
In the off-campus infraction, it would apply to extracurricular activities like athletics, because that's considered a privilege, not a right.
Right.
And because, again, the sort of like support for this kind of a policy always was that, as a student athlete, you are, by the very nature of you being a student athlete, you're representative of your school, you're considered a leader, and that is a privilege, and it is not something you are guaranteed, and so you are held to that
A
standard.
higher standard,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I mean, and the aftercare and the support and all that stuff should apply across the board.
Mhm.
And the way it's described in here with the discipline towards the consequences toward athletics or extracurricular events, to me, that doesn't matter if it's on campus or off campus. I mean, 'cause you, as an athlete, you're saying you're not going to be
Right.
involving yourself with drugs or alcohol. So
Right.
if it's on campus or off campus, you're still getting suspended from the games, the practices, what's happening.
So I
What
think
happens
the,
in school, there's additional consequences for that
Correct,
as well.
right.
so I think the question is, like, what does the intent of the language affect year round? And like, do we want to keep affect year round or not? Because like, or does that caveat of like the other pieces that we said, like if the debate team goes somewhere in the summer and they do something, whatever, right? Like that would count because it's a school sponsored event, even though it happens not during the September to June timeframe. Like it's kind of, I think, what are we trying to like to police, for lack of a better word?
And I think when we say year-round, that means summer, right? I think that's what that's referring to, is that,
July and August.
right, this
Yep.
policy is going to be in effect during that time. But sports don't start until the end of August. There's no programs that necessarily are happening during the summer.
So what I was
So I
thinking.
don't know if that's necessary to say this policy is in effect year-round, because we can't be monitoring what kids are doing.
So I was
Summer.
trying to think of how this maybe got. I always think whenever I read something in a policy, I think, oh, what happened that made somebody write it like this? So it's October, right? And pictures of the whatever team surface in October during their season of something that happened in July, that it's on social media or whatever, right? Would, if it didn't say affect year round, like then that wouldn't, like, well, it was July, like, I don't know.
Also,
Yeah,
like
like-
the cross-country team goes away, the
Yeah.
football team goes away in the summer, like, so there are things happening from an athletic standpoint in the summer.
That's why, like, I'd be curious to know, like, just the frequency of these types of issues that are brought to our attention, and like how any issues are brought to our attention. I can speak to like experience I've had at other schools where, like a picture is sent to the athletic director, and the athletic director gets it and has to investigate what it is and all that sort of things. Like that happened from time to time. I'd be curious about how it works here and how it's traditionally happened. I know our athletic director's relatively new, but,
I think that
When-
happens, I think the police break up a party.
Yep, that's
That's
just,
what I was gonna say.
yep.
That, when this first came to pass years
Yeah.
ago, that's what happened. I think it was somewhere in the East Bay. It was like the whole football team or the whole baseball team or something, police involvement, and then it was the question of, well, it was on the weekend, but I think that was actually during the school, during the school year, but it was on the weekend. What do we do? It's the whole team, and I think that was sort of the genesis
Right.
of
Yeah.
of these kind of policies.
During the summer, and I should know this, But during the summer, like when the teens are going away and doing something, that's not the official training time then. So when they do that, they're not going under the capacity of the school, like cross-country, they go to Block Island. for a
Right.
day. That's them starting a pre-practice, which is not officially the school-sanctioned, like, team
Yeah.
Right.
during
And I
that
think-
time.
I think Kenny, that,
I-
yeah, I think that the spirit behind this was that it didn't have to be for athletes.
Right.
Because I remember being part of like this when it was it's a statewide, movement. It was a few years back at least, and the idea behind it was that they recognized that there were some trends that they were seeing around alcohol and drug use among athletic teams, and they kind of like presented it to schools as your athletes are privileged to be athletes because it is something that's above and beyond a typical experience, and therefore they should be held to a higher standard, which is why you have this. So it kind of opened up that can of worms where it doesn't have to be a school sanctioned event. It doesn't have, you should be as a student, as an athlete representing your school, the idea was like you are committing to not being involved with drugs and alcohol.
Being a leader within your.
But
community.
but this policy isn't specifically for athletes. Like the sentence that we're
It's not,
talking
but
about
it
is
needs
not,
A lot of it is athletes.
It was.
some of it weaves it in and out, but that particular sentence I don't think is.
Which sentence were you looking at now?
The one that
So on
was on.
page 10, it's highlighted in yellow.
The policies in effect when on school property, at school functions or activities, as well as off school property. This policies
Yeah.
affect year-round.
JICH is basically for extracurriculars and athletics.
Mm-hmm. So JICH is this entire thing.
Yeah, I pulled JICHR in here, but if you read JICH, like as it stands, it's referring to sanctions about removing your extracurricular and athletic privileges, which, I mean,
It's not though, that's the problem, and so, like that, like it's written poorly, in my opinion, but like, when you look at the actual policy that's on our actual website for JICH, like, it says, the purpose of it is to establish for the purpose of setting forth, like, the North Kingston School Committee support for state and federal regulations about possession of illicit drugs, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't have anything explicitly in that purpose
Right.
about policing athletes.
Mhm.
Like, I know that it, like, later it gets messy, but like, I just wanna make sure that we're all really clear that JICH is a policy for all students.
Mm-hmm.
And whether, like, and so, like, we need to, I think, align that to that. Like, I know it's messed up, because later it specifically says things about athletes,
yeah, I mean,
which
the
is why we're looking at
policy-
it, but.
The policy itself, you're right, doesn't, but if you look at the discipline, it only, it refers
No,
you.
I understand, but I
Yeah.
just want to make sure the four of us are clear on,
Yes.
this is a policy for all
Yes,
students.
all students should
Like,
not be,
yeah.
yes. But-
And so, and it has nothing to do specifically with athletes. If we want to put in additional language or caveats about athletes, or if it's in conflict with the student handbook or the athlete, whatever, like, we need to think about that. But like, this is a general overall, this is what we're supporting, this is what the punishment is for students that violate this, like, boom, 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 right? Like, and so I know it's messy, but like, I just want to make sure that we know it's not just an athlete policy.
And
It's not.
I think now that you're saying that, I think that's why I brought JICHR into this, because this policy as it's written
Yeah.
in here,
And the R is like the
the R handles discipline and sanctions for on-school violations. JICH, if you read under violations and consequences, it only talks about like sanctions related to athletes, I mean extracurricular and athletic activities. It doesn't say like if you are found doing something on school property. Like, so I think they both need to be together.
There's no other policy that we have that.
Like, it should say,
Doesn't say any of those
if
things.
you are caught on campus, this is what happens. If
Mhm.
you are caught off campus, this is what happens. Like, they should reside in the same place, because otherwise it does leave that impression that
Yep.
nothing can happen to you if you don't do it on campus.
If you're caught off campus, that would be, would that be consequences that would apply only to students who are members of athletic teams or
It has to.
extracurricular?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, it has to.
Because that, we need to differentiate.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I was asking about the other layers too, about the, like, I don't think I've ever seen the, like, thing that the student athletes sign. Like the contract, or for lack of a better word. Yeah, that. Ken has it. And so, like, does that, like, if that specifically says something, like, that shouldn't be in conflict, then, you know, like, we wanna make sure that they're not in conflict with each other, or maybe what we're talking about is handled there. But then the question would be, okay, if my kid does violate that, then what policy are they violating? You know, like, that's where it has to swing back to, I think, this policy.
I think
So it says right under, so in section, so in the athletic handbook, section, oh, there's no section numbers. So after rules and regulations, it gets into a bunch of ABCDs. And D is alcohol, drug policy, extracurricular activities. And the first bullet says, North Kingstown High School athletes and any other participants in school-sponsored clubs or activities must comply with the chemical health and student safety policy, KICH.
Yeah, which is good.
So it's right there. Then it talks about it being a drug-free zone. Talks about being under the influence, intoxication, possession, or sale, distribution is prohibited in school buildings, vehicles, or on school grounds. The section on policy expectations for students on and off school property.
Yeah, that's the part that we were just talking about.
Students must make the commitment to refrain from the use of alcohol, drugs, and steroids as mandated by state law and North Kingstown School Committee. Students are considered in violation of this policy if they use or are in presence or possess, consume. No student will consume any illicit substance or any prescription medication not prescribed by medical personnel. This policy is in effect when on school property, at school functions or activities, as well as off-school property. So they both reference off-school.
Yeah, that's
So-
this, does it say in there this policy is in effect year-round?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's in this policy.
So, I mean, it's.
Yeah, right now it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where's the,
What were you gonna say?
I don't want to interrupt here. I mean, it seems to me you would have the policy, the discipline policy for all students. And then either a paragraph in this, and I would do it just like generically for all students, and then either a paragraph or two that specifically deals with anything above and beyond for athletes, or I think what Dr. Duba is saying right now, even something in the student handbook
which is
that
there.
says, you know, this is going to be above and beyond the disciplinary policy. The only caveat to that would be, if you're using the student handbook, that wouldn't necessarily cover other, the debate team, the extracurricular activities. That might be, you know, I mean, because that's really the question, right? And there is a difference. If a student is just a regular student, non-athlete who, you know, unfortunately gets arrested for having alcohol in the car on a school night, there's very little you can do if it's not related to school. But with an athlete, you may be able to do something different. I mean,
So to that point, would it make more sense then to just sort of like structure this as like a policy for drug use, drug alcohol use of all students, and then have, like you're saying, a separate smaller section that pertains to student athletes?
in my head, as we sit here right now, I think that's cleaner. I do,
I think
because
so
that way
too.
you can say, here's our policy, and then if you're an athlete, extracurricular, whatever, these additional, you know, this policy, either it will apply whatever additional caveats you're gonna have for
Right.
that group of students. I think it just might, because we try trying to merge the two.
Yeah.
And they overlap anyway, and they were completely inconsistent on the 30 days versus the suspension. I wonder if it's just easier to say,
It
here's
seems
the
like we're kind of
policy.
weaving in and out of it too a little bit, like
Yep.
it's maybe better if we just kind of do one and then.
Exactly, here's the policy,
Yeah.
and by the way, if you're an
On-school
athlete, here's the additional caveat
Yes.
that, you know.
And then additional penalties off school property for
Exactly.
extracurricular
Yep.
athletic
Yep.
events.
And even, and on those two, and I think I said it in here, one of my comments, I think the key for something like that is the flexibility for the administration.
Yeah.
Right, because it's a big
Yeah.
difference between the whole football team out at a keg party at someone's house versus someone who pops into a birthday party with some friends and after they've been there for an hour realizes another kid's, you know what I mean, there's all different scenarios. And I think you really, you know, when you're looking at something like that, just due process would require you to look at all the circumstances that were involved.
Absolutely.
I think the handbook covers a lot of it. It's
The student handbook?
Yeah, especially for
That's the
athletes.
athlete handbook,
Right,
not the student
right, I'm
handbook,
sorry,
right?
the
Yeah.
the athletic
Yeah.
handbook covers a lot of this if we were to reference.
So with all of that said, are we taking out year-round from this policy? Is that our recommendation, or is our recommendation to keep it? I've gotten lost in our
The
depth
policy
of
being effective
conversation.
year-round,
That's the current question, right? Is it, do we want to leave that language in? I heard concern from Ken regarding, is that even enforceable, like blah, 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 right? Like that part of it. And then there's the other side, which is like, do you want to take that out, right? Like that's what I thought we were debating. And so the
Yeah.
question is like, where do people land on that?
I mean, the policy says the next for athletes, for a first violation, the athlete will be suspended for the next sanctioned event. So I'm in favor of leaving it in year round, because if something happens over the summer and, you know, so for the soccer player, that means the sanction takes effect when soccer season comes in. That's the way I look at it.
I agree, and I look at it this way, like, I see it that way, and in effect, what we're saying is this: if we are saying that we're holding athletes to a higher standard of expectation, meaning that they need to, they can suffer consequences for sports outside of their school student responsibilities, then that is year-round.
Right.
That's year-round.
Yeah.
Whether it's, whether it's on a Saturday night in October or in July,
Right.
it's the same thing.
Right.
You know? So
Is
I.
that a school committee level, like where does that land though, as far as like district policy versus like, you know, like there's a lot of layers, so like
Mhm.
this is like school committee policy, right? So like, do we want to be differentiating one small population of, like yes, a coach of course is gonna say like this is this and whatever, but like is that, we wanna like differentiate athletes from all our other students as far as what our expectations are, and like, is that what we want to do? Like, I agree with you, like, I'm an athlete, I grew up in an athlete house,
Yeah,
like, I
yeah.
understand athletes, you know, but like, and from a school committee level, do we want to differentiate one subpopulation? Like, I don't think we would do that in other ways, like, I think we would treat all our students the same and have the same expectations in that way, I don't know. Like, I get it, but then at the same time, I think about it, I'm like, I don't. Like if the athletic director wants in the athletic handbook to say, hey, like if you violate this policy, you're missing the first game of your season, I think that's different than like the school committee deeming like athletes will also receive additional punishments.
So what happens then when, you know, the soccer player does something in July,
Mhm.
the soccer coach says, sorry, you're sitting out, and the parent comes and says, why are you benching my kid?
Mhm.
And they say it's in the handbook, and they say it's not in the district policy.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just trying to like think through the opposite side of like another student does something in July, like you're not suspending them for the first week of school,
We
right?
wouldn't be suspending the athlete
Yeah.
for school, it would just be their next.
Yeah.
Athletic event.
Aaron, I see your point.
Yeah.
I do. I really see your point. I think that there is a uniqueness to athletics here that like doesn't really apply necessarily to other areas, even though like I agree with you
Yeah.
in theory about it, because I do agree that like students performing in the musical are.
Yeah, like so like a
student
football
leaders.
player and a theater person
Right.
go to something this
You're
in
on
the
the-
summer together,
The
right?
theater person, it should
Right.
apply to them also, is athletics and
It says
extracurricular.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that I think is an important distinction though,
Yeah.
because Rob, not in a bad way, but you've referenced athletes as held to a higher standard. So any student participating in
It is
any
standard.
extracurricular is held to a higher
and
standard.
athletics, yes, absolutely.
Because we have something extra we can take away from them?
Yes.
Yes.
Just
That's the
before their
difference.
first athletic
Yeah.
season or extracurricular
Yeah.
activity.
The practical application is
Yeah.
where we'll have to look.
But like, why
because
wouldn't that just be with the administrator, like the principal,
It would be.
and the deans to make the determination of what's the appropriate punishment
It would.
versus, like, I don't know.
It
Well, you
would-
could
no, it
certainly
would
do
be.
that, but I think to Jen's point, you might, and again, maybe for athletes and extracurricular, we just have a sentence or a paragraph that says, you know, these folks are held to a higher standard and violation of this policy during any point in the year may be subject to additional discipline, because what
Can
you
we do
don't
an
want.
opposite? I don't like that we're saying that athletes and extracurriculars are held to a higher standard. All of our North Kingstown students should be held to the standard of this policy, right? Like, it's not above and beyond, where they are held to
You
the
just
standard.
can't.
I would put it in the discipline part, I would say, students that participate in athletics and extracurricular activities, like, that could be part of their discipline sanction based on the administrators or something
Yeah.
like that. I would go that way.
Just something where
Yeah.
we're noting that there is you are subject to
That's
additional
that's my
discipline.
concern, because
Yeah.
otherwise you could have a
Yeah.
parent say, here's
Yep.
your policy, it doesn't reference anything
No, I
about
understand that, and I don't
ABC.
like stuff like that either, but I guess, I think the part that was like, no, they're all that no matter what you're participating in or not participating in, you're held to the standard. It's a zero tolerance policy, so it's not like, and so then, but I think it has to be in that other part, not in the main part. Like, it's just, this is a policy for everyone, but then if you participate in extracurriculars or,
And it does, I mean, it
Athletics,
says
that could
it
be part of
multiple
it.
times in here, that if the student participates in athletics or
Yeah.
extracurricular activities, there are consequences for participating in those activities,
Yeah.
which it should be. Because if a student that doesn't participate in anything, you can't provide any
I think the question,
consequences against those.
it's the year-round part is the question. Like, that's the part, and you, like, to your point, you were like, is this?
Right, and it is, I mean, that is just, you know, something happens over the summer. It's not part of a school event. But
Otherwise,
it's-
like the students who participate in fall only, like,
It could be winter too.
well, you know, it's their next, you know, it's just, I think it has to be year round, otherwise,
If it happens over the summer, it would be applicable to whatever sports season they would first play in.
right.
Could be the spring. You know what I
Do we
mean?
even have, for,
And as far as-
do we have
as far as-
jurisdiction year-round?
Well, again, for the extracurricular things, I think arguably yes, because again,
Because
depending.
it's a
It's a privilege.
privilege
Yeah,
matter,
it's a
right?
privilege. I think you'd look to that when we hold these folks to a higher standards and their role models. But that's arguable. I mean, you know, if I'm the parent of said soccer player, and I'm arguing, hey, this happened over July, this wouldn't happen to your kid because they, why should?
We're not, we are not bound to guarantee to a student that they participate on an athletic team. It is above and beyond
Yeah.
what they're, and so that's kind of the approach of it, is that,
differential.
I would always say this to the athletes, it's a privilege to wear that uniform.
Mhm.
It's a privilege. You're representing your school, and it's not something that's guaranteed to you, you know? That's
And
kind
again, I
of
think that's where the
angle I
discretion part comes
Yeah,
in too. Is that's
exactly.
what, if it's, I'll go back to that example,
Same
if
as
it's
you
all
can't
over the
cut students from the
newspaper and
team.
everybody's talking about it and it's the entire team, that discipline, one would assume, would be different than if it's just, a kid who self-reports or another kid comes to Rob and says, hey, listen, I saw Andrew at a party last night and in, July 4th party and he had a beer in his hand.
Mhm.
I mean,
Right.
And I think
what do
there
you
has
do
to be
with it?
evidence, right? I mean, I think that's
Has to be
part of what I'm
evidence.
saying is like, we have to be able to manage this, so that way it can't just be someone say, oh, so-and-so, was doing drugs, drinking alcohol. Like, there
Well,
needs to
yeah, the
be
second
evidence to
string
that for us to be able
quarterbacks-
to follow through with that.
Parents can't
Right.
call and say, I
By the
saw.
Right.
The first
Like a
and second
Tanya
string
Harding,
parent who were at my
right.
house drinking with
Right,
me.
yeah,
So
I
they
mean,
go,
there has
That's
to
what I'm
be
saying. Like,
some-
when it's off school grounds, it's summer or
Right.
something like that, or weekends, like, there needs to be evidence.
Yeah,
It's something that
absolutely.
someone had a picture on social media, someone.
And it becomes increasingly difficult for the
they were
school
arrested,
administration,
they
because you
were-
can't control that investigation like you can during the school
Right.
year in a school-sponsored event.
Correct.
can't go off of like an email of
Right.
someone just making a claim,
Okay, so we've got
so.
we've got policy, purpose, sanctions for all students for on-school infractions, a phrase that says athletes and extracurriculars are subject to additional penalties, policy in effect year-round, and then discussions about interventions, aftercare, and such. Does that sound right? And then
Mhm.
maybe have the principals and the AD look at it once more.
Look at it one more time.
Does everybody sound okay with that?
So after the second revised policy statement for all students, then we'll put in specific language for students that are involved in athletics and extracurricular activities.
Yep. Aaron?
I'm just looking, there's like 3 different parts where it talks about different, like, things, so I was just looking to see if they need to be changed.
And then can you had a question about cyber images? Or were you talking about the presence at parties with alcohol? Which one were you questioning whether it was enforceable? Page 10.
So again, this would be for athletes, right? Is it enforceable? It's hard. It's not impossible, but it's hard. There has to be some clear evidence. There has to be an investigation that's done properly, and there has to be, usually visual evidence or evidence provided by law enforcement or something like that, that would show. I mean, it happens, you know what I mean? Kids do things they're not supposed to, and sometimes they record it.
My concern would
You know?
again be the, shall be confirmation of a violation of the code of conduct, right? With what kids can do with computers and, AI and everything else that we know now.
Mhm.
I think to Rob's point, I never like a carte blanche. I think there would have to be some, if a kid can come in and say, no, look, here's the picture.
It was
Right.
for-
This has been superimposed, or this wasn't me,
Right,
blah, blah,
right,
blah.
it can be doctored,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
This
So
is
it-
exactly
But again, I think an investigation would hopefully vet that out.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but the way this is written, it says shall be confirmation of a violation of the code
Yeah,
of
that
conduct.
should not be, yeah.
Yep.
And then I did have a question if G was enforceable.
Okay, so if we add.
Because I just
the-
was wondering, regarding images, to me, it's evidence, I just want to make sure that we can take that.
Yeah, I think
As
to
evidence to
to Rod's
use.
point, it's a piece of evidence that you take in like you would any other complaint. If you've got a picture of Andrew holding whatever it is, okay, we're going to investigate. We're not gonna take that as carte blanche, that if there's been a violation, or we're not going to ignore it, we're gonna take it in, we're gonna investigate it, see where the facts lead us, and then, but it could make you subject to discipline.
Okay.
Sure.
I think that's a good, yeah. Give us that wiggle
Yeah.
room,
Yeah.
because you need it, yeah.
Okay. So are we comfortable moving on from this one?
No, I had a couple more questions, sorry.
Okay.
Can we get back to page 4? I put page numbers on it to help us,
Okay.
I think, if I'm the right one.
I'm getting page numbers.
I don't see page numbers, but that's okay. What
Really?
part?
May have to refresh.
Andrew does.
I see.
Yeah, refresh it.
At the
Refresh,
bottom.
maybe?
Yep.
I see page 8.
That's okay, okay.
Alright. Anyways, it's under the part where it's talking about discipline, and it is under B is there. It says notify appropriate law enforcement / juvenile agency.
I'm sorry, where are you?
Under discipline number.
I'm under discipline on page 4.
Oh, B, okay, yep, I see, yep.
Possession of controlled substance. Administrator will review the incident with the student.
And this is under the concept of possession of controlled substance related paraphernalia or use. Well, right, so it's under that thing. So they do one of those things, then the building administrator will report the incident to review the incident with the student and the parent or guardian to determine if this is a first offense or repeated concern. That I was a little confused about because, I think what it meant was is this a repeated behavior or like a one-time behavior, but like the way that I actually read it was like first offense is like I guess what that part was confusing in my brain because I was thinking about like, is it a school first offense or is it a life first offense? Like, right, or like what's the, like that part was a little bit confusing, but that wasn't my biggest concern. My next bigger concern was, then I think it said suspend the student from school for a minimum of 5 days, referral to superintendent of schools for pre-expulsion hearing, and then notify appropriate law enforcement / juvenile agency. Like my question 1 was like, when do they do that? Like what's that threshold? And then question 2 was like, is there a timeline on when they need to report that?
I'm not aware of any timeline for like a DCYF reporting.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that when you say juvenile agency, that's what came to my head, if maybe a kiddo's in DCYF custody or
I wasn't thinking
DCYF involved.
I was thinking more of like,
A juvenile hearing board?
yeah, like a juvenile hearing board. Do we have, there might be something like that. I've known
Yep.
communities that have that before.
I just thought that like it says it, you will like notify law
Well, I
enforcement.
guess it would depend on the situation too.
Yeah, but like as it's written, that's not how it's written.
Right.
You know what
That's
I mean?
I'm saying, like, it depends on the situation.
You don't, but you don't want to give
Exactly.
people.
I have to say, like, this is very strict and very
Please, because someone
black
got
and white,
pictures of
which
someone
What
I
concerns me about
personally
policies
am
though.
I don't know.
No, and I'm not advocating that we should be calling the law enforcement anytime a student like is standing near a beer. That's
I don't
but
think
like
so.
but as it's written,
No.
it says that you have to.
Right.
And so
Right.
then you get in your brain and you're like, oh well, that's silly. I'm not gonna. You know, like you innately say like, oh, I'm not gonna do that, and then it devalues the policy, right? Like so when things are written like this, I thought it was like a little limited.
So
Like I didn't like
I
how it was
added
written.
comments that we could, to change that section.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all of this
So-
can change.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, but I just
Yeah.
as I was reading through, like you went through the things that you went through, but that was one that section caught me as like it was a will statement, and then it was like some very specific things that like I didn't know. I thought we could make that section stronger and tighter than how it was written now, and more appropriate for like, you know, if deemed necessary, or if like I don't know, whatever, then this
I think-
this person would be notified, or the law enforcement agency. You know, like if somebody's selling whatever, right, in school,
What if we just said
then
something
that's
like-
one thing. But
May include the following, something like that.
Yeah.
Like potential actions may include the following. Is that
And
something that
and
we do in
put
policy? Is
well,
that
I put
normal?
in comments, like, because I also don't agree
Yeah.
that it says the child's gonna be suspended. I'm not a big fan of suspension because I think we're not supporting the child, we're not teaching them anything. So, you know, I put comments in there of what
I feel like a mandate
I would
is
prefer this policy to read as far as, you know, the discipline consequences and supporting the student, which would change,
Yeah, like I don't know if,
it would change.
So remember,
from
this is what
80
it currently is.
right.
Yeah, so do you all want to regroup on this?
Yeah, and that's
Come
where
back
like,
to
that's where
us?
it's kind of like, this is regulation, like, should it be policy, because it's more administrative regulations of what, how we deal with something, as far as the consequence and discipline.
It's tricky though too, because we want to make sure that it's consistent, and then we also want to make sure that if somebody disagrees with the decision, that we're able to support them, right? So like you don't want the administrators out there without that like no, the school
True.
committee approved this, the school committee said it can be this, the administrator did the right thing, the superintendent did the right thing, we hear the hearing, and then we say, no, the policy says this, whatever, right? So I go back and forth on it too, as far as like specific things like this, because I feel like you need to give some guidance, and you don't want, I use the middle schools as an example, you don't want one middle school handling it a certain way and doing a certain thing, and then the other middle school doing it a certain way and doing another thing, right? So like I feel like you need some consistency or some guidance with, of course, what you always talk about, Rob, with like that there's a big difference between a student like selling drugs in the middle school or like standing near a beer at a party at a like a football game, right? Like there's a huge difference, but I do think you need some consistent guidance and language, and then also like mechanism for appeal. And so do we want, Jen, to kind of what you were getting at, do you want like Ken and Robin, appropriate administrators, to go like back through and like actually change the language? Like what would be useful in getting us like a step further?
I think that would be useful. because like even further down in that, like step A is review the incident with the student and parent guardian, and then step C is notify the student's
Yeah, I
parent
saw
guardian.
that, it was just messy.
Yeah. And then if you look down a little bit farther, it says, if a student commits a second infraction, they'll be dismissed for the remainder of the season, but
Yeah,
in the
that's
other
the first
policy, it said 90 days. So it's just, there's a lot of disconnects. I mean, like, I think,
Like, I almost feel like the administration should, for lack of a better word, like literally start with a clean doc and like,
I was just about to say,
Yeah.
blow this up almost.
yeah, like, and then just
So-
come back to the policy subcommittee with, like, obviously use it as guidance, but like literally, I would literally, if it was me, I would literally start with a blank doc
And
and
say
start
this-
putting in what we think is best, and then the four of us can talk about it and then send it to the school committee. Because I just feel like it's a little bit of a mess, but I also agree with you, and actually what you did was really helpful, Jen, but like, I feel like we have some philosophical like things we need to work through, and then there's also just some like logistical things that need to be fixed.
100%.
A
But
lot of
it's-
repetitive stuff.
Yeah, and it's a pretty repetitive and pretty.
Because you merge the two things that
Yeah.
were already
Yeah.
in conflict anyway.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
so,
I agree 100%.
but like I wouldn't come back like this, like I would
No,
literally just come back with a new
fresh
doc.
doc.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I ask a general question? In terms of just like what goes into policy around discipline, like, is it typical for discipline to be like prescribed specifically within a school committee policy? Or is that something where we want to kind of make a more general statement at that level and make the more specific guidance
So-
come at the.
My preference for discipline is much more general at the policy level.
Okay.
I know, the handbooks, especially with the Safe Schools Act and suspension being, I mean, we've gotten away from the mandatory 5-day suspension for just about anything. The one thing that I do worry about when it's general, I think Erin sort of pointed out, was like different administrators or different schools handling
Yeah.
similar situations differently. That's always a concern of mine, So that's why I think in the handbooks and some of those things, this particular offense, up to, 3 days, up to 5 days. Because what you don't want is Principal Earl to, catch someone smoking in the bathroom and vaping in the bathroom and say you get a 1-day suspension, and Principal Hennius gives a 10-day suspension, and there has to be some level of consistency and some message to the students
I
as to
agree.
what,
Yeah.
and it helps the
that's-
administrators too.
And that's where I think that at the handbook level, at least from my experience, that's why to write properly at the handbook level, it should include ranges, and it should include like progressions in terms of the like.
Yeah, first offense, second offense,
Yes,
whatever.
yeah, exactly.
I
You know
think
what mean?
too, and like the way that we think, a way that the school committee policy should be is like the policy is the policy, right? So that would be JICH. And then in theory, JICHR would be that part that you're talking about. I think where these two got messed up is like there's stuff that should be in JICH in JICHR, and then there's conflicts in those languages. So I think it's fine if they stay apart, but as they were written, they can't be in conflict. Like it should be, this is the policy, and then JICHR would be, hey, if you violate this policy, this is what the administration does based on that. And if I'm fine with those being separate if they're not in
Conflict.
disaster conflict,
Right.
yeah, which is what they are right now. Because you can look at the two documents and there's two different things for one. Like that date thing is a huge example of that.
Mhm.
So is that good action item? Everybody okay with that?
Mhm.
I would recommend though, Jen, I know that we have this one on the next agenda, kind of to Ken's point, like
Yeah.
we'll stick with this one until.
This one
And
is,
just get it done.
Yeah, I just think like if we could have it on the next one, that'll be helpful for us to keep.
what's that song? The cat came back, it wouldn't go away? That's his policy.
It's a really important one though, like it matters.
No, it really does, and that's why I think,
Yeah.
and I think working through the fundamental philosophy part of it,
Yeah.
which I feel like we kind of did a
Mhm.
good job with today, is,
So just for clarity, Erin, so you're looking for us to review is it that section on discipline that you're referencing is the one that we want
I want you to look
Just
at
clean
the
that
whole
up.
The whole
thing.
thing.
to, oh, the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay,
Tip to
got it.
tail.
All right.
yeah. And however you want to do it, whether you want to look at
Yeah.
both of them, whether you want to look at the red line, whether you want to look at all of it, but just come back with what you think
What the
should
administration
be,
thinks JICH should be, with obviously in accordance to the state laws that it's referencing, and then JICHR, like
No,
just basically.
I wouldn't even worry about the R, because
You want
like,
to just start with.
just whatever whatever should be in the.
No, you have to do both, because if we adopt JICH,
We can kill
and then-
JICHR. That's
But
what
then
we've
if
done with
you-
everything else. We've gotten rid of all the Rs.
but there's, yeah, okay, you could do it like that.
Yeah.
Let us rewrite the policy.
Yeah.
We'll bring it back with some of the regulation stuff in it.
Yeah, if you
Right,
need
and that way
anything
it's
from
consistent.
JICHR
We'll
in the
bring it,
policy.
and that way
yep.
we get rid of
Yeah.
the R's,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think it's also gonna be just more
Yeah.
consistent
Yep.
and easier for everyone to be able
Yep.
to read and get through.
Yep.
So.
Okay.
Okay, so now on to the next one with two. So we had talked about this at the next one, is the JBA teen dating, which also is kind of the same issue. Teen dating and teen dating violence. I think this one is a little bit further along. We've got a good red line going here, but I think what we need to do here is just figure out, and I know Rachel said that she was gonna go through the R with her group at the PD in like March or April, I think. But I think what we need to do is look at the R and see if there's anything in the R that needs to be in the policy. Because I think there is some stuff that needs to be in the policy. So I wanted to look at the R and see what from that needs to come in, or if we want to have that as an action item. But I don't want that, because I don't think we need all the forms and all of that stuff. You know, maybe one form, or maybe some of the, I think we had talked about, maybe having one of the disciplinary charts in, but I think we
The
said.
other thing too is these complaint forms, we've redone all of our complaint forms with all the training, so I would get rid of all these forms.
Okay.
This entire
Yeah, I think the
G,
intent
R,
here is to get rid
it's
of
gonna
the R
contradict
and
all the
just,
training we're doing with Title IX and
if there is
discipline complaints.
something in this R policy as it stands right now that should come into JBA, I'd like to bring that in, otherwise I'd like to get rid of the JBA R. Because again, this is all administrative.
I would.
But like, there is a blurb in here about parent education and social norms change.
I'm not super comfortable eliminating it until there's something to replace it with.
Yeah, I don't want to eliminate it right now, but if there's something
Yeah.
that we want to pull and put
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
into it.
Yep. I just think I think that some of the things like the chart and stuff might need to be updated, but I do think that it's helpful to have a guiding document like that where it literally says you must inform the police. This is and again, we can
Yep.
change the things, we can do the things, but it does outline, I think, in a certain way, helpful guidance in some of the very
Yep.
important things that need to be done as far as policies and steps and whatnot.
So I'm not sure what the best way is to go about this. Anybody have any suggestions?
So, one of the things in the R that kind of jumped out at me a little bit is, and I don't know where this came from, I don't want to, be, dismissive or anything,
It's in
but,
2012, so.
yeah. When it
I'm
says
saying,
protocol for school-based intervention for staff members,
Sorry, we're on the first page?
yeah, this is in the R one.
Yep.
What jumped out at me is I just have a real concern around, when I think staff members, you're thinking anybody is staff member at any level in any position within a school setting. And I'm looking at it here, any school staff member witnesses or learns of an act of teen dating violence, etc. The guidance that's provided is pretty extensive for maybe any staff member to be taking on. I just think the expectations there are a little much given the seriousness of that situation.
Yeah, the list to me almost read as what the administrator might do in that
Yes.
situation, but it doesn't say hello custodian, go get an administrator.
Right.
Right. They have administrators
Yeah,
next,
but
that's
it
the next
should-
step
Yeah.
down, but like, it's like,
Like a lot of these things are important, but like definitely should be handled by the appropriate,
report it.
Yeah.
Before we get into 1, 2, and 3.
Right,
it's
report it
situation
immediately,
to
like-
building
Yes,
administrator.
yes.
Like,
yeah,
that's-
I get the intent, like, I think it's good that it like kind of talks about, like lays it out, right? Like, you would then speak to the bystanders about, like, but like, that shouldn't be just any staff member.
No,
I
no.
also caught on to that as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to see what it says in the actual
I
policy.
think it should just say protocol for school-based intermittent staff, it should be reported to the building principal, get rid of everything else, because then it gets into,
Yeah, like
and
what
we'll
the
make sure it's
administrator-
the same, but, bullets 1 through 6.
There might be some other steps though that we might
Similar.
want, like, staff members to take, right? Sorry, finish your thought, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just, a lot of what's in here should not have to be left to,
I think separating the
Staff
victims
member.
from the alleged perpetrator is reasonable to ask of them, but as soon as that, after that, to me, you report it, because
if that's a
Shouldn't be
reasonable.
speaking with
they
each
shouldn't
other.
be, investigating, they shouldn't be speaking, like, that's,
Yeah, I think the other part too was like, but like, I wonder what best practices would be, like, say it was a situation where like something happened and then like there are some students around there, like I wonder if it would be like good guidance to say like, note like the student witnesses to give to the administrator, right? So like, or like, like things to put in there, like if you saw like somebody hit somebody, for example, and then you noticed like, oh, that teacher was there and that student was there, like, and then you go to tell your principal, like you need to have, like it might be some guidance there, like where it talks about bystanders and when it talks about different things, but like, yeah, we
But
need
all that's
to.
gonna happen when. the
yeah, that's all gonna come out with the
administrator
administrator if they,
steps in And starts doing the investigation.
Yeah.
I don't think it needs to be in there for the staff member, because I don't think that, so if you witness, let's say something happened right in the classroom, and it was an abusive situation, right? They're going to separate, they should be separating the students, calling administration, calling for additional staff, to come up. The investigation's gonna start and be conducted through the administrator, who's then going to go, step by step of who you're gonna talk to and witnesses, and I think all of that can be left to the administrative level, not the staff level.
Yeah. I was just going back to the Rhode Island general law.
I'm just thinking, process-wise, that's what's gonna happen.
So I just went back to 162130, which is what this policy,
And that's why there was some conflict in some of the definitions, because that
Yeah.
162130 defines a couple of terms relatively loosely.
yeah. And then it also, some of the language in this is from this,
Yep.
like it's not, and so that's the other part that I think we have to be careful about.
I thought we went through that.
But like,
And I tried to address some of that by just referencing, our ACB that has a different definition. Because so I left the statutory definitions in here.
so it says the policy has to include, but is not limited to a statement on dating violence will not be tolerated, dating violence reporting procedures. So the actual policy has to have dating violence reporting procedures in it. So that's something I think important to note, is it can't just be, like it has to be very specific guidelines to responding to school incidents of dating violence and discipline procedures specific to the incidents. And then shall be published in any policy or handbook. Training should happen yearly. Andrew, is the reason we didn't fold this one under ABA is because because it by statute has to be a separate policy, right?
Yeah, by statute,
Yeah.
it has to be a second policy, and not to further upset the apple cart, but I know, having talked to Dr. Duva and Barton Gilman, I think there's probably, we're trying to wrap our hands around exactly how that ACB works and the breadth and scope of it.
Yeah.
So that might be coming back a little bit to
Yeah,
sort
we
of
might need to-
narrow that one a little bit more, which would then really expand the process in some of these other ones, if
Yeah.
that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I think it's becoming like, while the intent
It's a
was
little
good,
amorphous.
it's an incredible
Really?
burden on them, and it actually doesn't really give parents and students maybe some of the rights that they might want through the investigation phase and everything. I don't want to speak for you guys, I just know.
No,
Well,
We
we
had
can't talk
we
about
had
that one right now
conversation,
anyways.
so, yep.
Yeah, we can definitely bring that one back. But, because I was just noticing in JBA, Jen, it specifically mentions harassment, like right, taunting, harassment, whatever. And then like that other one is the anti-harassment policy. And so then when looking at RIGBL, it's very specific about dating violence. Like, it's not just about general harassment and this is 100% a like teen dating violence
Right.
thing. And so I think because we have that other one now, like we should look at this one through that
Narrow
lens
it
of trying to
down.
narrowing it down to
Okay.
be very specific to teen violence, to not have any like confusion there.
Yep.
Like I don't want, like,
There'll
is
be
this
some overlap, but
harassment
yeah.
here? Is it harassment here?
Well,
Of course it could be, but like right now it's it is really
And I think that,
repetitive.
and that's also for whoever the victim is, I mean,
Yeah.
they should have an option as to how they want if it's sexual harassment, how
Yeah.
they want that investigated. They want that under Title IX, or as we know, they may not, they want it done under the dating violence policy. So,
Mhm.
Yep.
I wonder, dating violence, oh, it is defined here, okay.
Yep.
Oh, that was my question.
And that's in the law.
Yep,
Yeah.
it says here differs from RIGL definition, question mark, I don't know.
yeah, I missed
Did it
that one,
not
I'm trying to
line
find
up
it.
there?
So the
No, they didn't line
definition
up.
is, do you need me to?
I'm trying to pull it, I had it when it went out.
Which one did you think was different, Jen?
The dating violence one?
So the law dating violence says, means a pattern of abusive or coercive behavior used to exert power and control over current or former dating partner. Behaviors may occur online, in person, or through use of technology. Abuse may be physical, verbal, emotional, sexual, financial, or psychological, and includes threats, isolation, and intimidation.
Yeah, that's very different than what we have.
Yep.
And someone.
And it's also different, I believe, from what the dating
Someone
violence is in
noted
ACB.
two
Really?
different
Yeah, I think, which is why, again, that's why I put C also, because if I put C also,
But dating violence and dating partner.
my
I think so,
recollection is, a while I looked at this, but my recollection is that's probably because the sexual assault and dating violence was defined also in ACB, perhaps differently. This one, at least the first sentence, mimics the RIGL, or the start of it, whereas the other one I don't think touched it at all. So there is gonna be some overlap there. I don't know how you reconcile that without either
I think
going
you have to
afoul.
go with this one.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and that's what I said, but
Yeah.
also just.
But you have to
include a
change it in
reference
the
to
other, I would change it in the other one
Did you
too.
do that?
Unless there was something in there that we felt,
Yeah, I'd have to
was-
see whether she pulled that from like a particular Title IX. I mean, there's no set definitions, but I can look at that.
if the state of Rhode Island's saying this, I would carry that all the way through unless.
Putting it
the
back
fe-
in
Unless the federal,
ACB?
yeah, I would change the
Okay.
definition to match this in ACB, so that unless the Title IX
Yep.
stuff has the federal one would trump the state one.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
And if that is the case, then we should let our General Assembly know, because they should update this one. You know what I
Could-
mean,
Yeah.
like,
I'm just thinking out loud here, but could it be problematic or overly difficult if we have a dating violence policy and then we also have reference to dating violence in a separate policy? Could that,
See, I think this is where the intersect with Title IX and some of the other policies comes up, and I think while it's awkward, I think it has to be, because let's say you've got an incident occurs in a dating situation, that could also fall as a violation of
Right.
Title IX. As you know, that family may want to pursue it under Title IX. They also may not. They may want to say, well, I don't want to go through all those particular steps, so I prefer to go under your dating policy, or something like that, to give them a different avenue.
I just wonder if like it could trip people up potentially if there is like some kind of language that doesn't line up from one policy
I
to
think we
another
should make
policy.
sure that the policies refer to each other.
And that's why I did the C also, but let me check on those definitions, Aaron, because that's a good point.
yeah. The other part that's in the law is that each school district shall provide dating violence training to all administrators, teachers, nurses, and mental health staff at the middle school and high school levels.
Which we do.
We do, yeah.
Yep. Upon the recommendation of the administrators, other staff may be included. And then there's very specific things that the training has to include, and then it has to be
We
yearly.
use the training from the state.
Yep, okay, perfect.
Our current policy says, what does it say? It says, I just have it and I lost it. Schools may wish to adopt the model restraining order, no contact order, school checklist, CJBAR, and it says, is there such a thing?
Where is this?
Under enforcement of protective orders.
In the
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
policy.
Yeah, it's in the
Yeah.
policy, it's on page 7.
When a legal protective order has been issued by the court to protect one student, whether the school should make the following. Okay.
Does such a thing exist?
So if
So-
you go back and look at the forms, I thought that was.
So, yeah, in the event, and Andrew, you might be able to speak to this more, but in the event that there is a, formal legal restraining order,
Yeah, we have a form here, GBA, under the GBAR, there's a restraining order, no contact order, school checklist.
Is that form still being used? Because if it's referencing the form, I want to have it in the policy, not out of the policy.
Yeah, we just need to review the forms from 2012. We just want to
Okay.
update these.
And then just the way that it said model.
Because we have the
it
safety plan, which we use.
Made me think that it was like
There's a
some.
school-based stay away agreement,
And then the other thing it references is.
which we'll find out, because I know this has happened in the past, this over the last year. So we can find out this actually is the one that you're using.
And then it says, CJBAR chart of recommended disciplinary actions for teen dating violence and sexual violence.
Well, that's what that is, right? That's this.
That's this whole regulation piece.
So like, right? Like that.
Yeah, so I think maybe based on what we've been saying, maybe we take that out and just say disciplinary sanctions may include?
No, it says it has to be specific.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
The discipline part?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, if I read that correctly.
Say policy or handbook for that part, don't we?
Yeah, let me see.
It says discipline procedure specific to the incident.
Okay. So same thing, I think we should pull it in.
Yeah, any of those some incidents, the consequence, and then who's being
Is the
contacted.
part in,
So-
is the part about how the school district shall inform students' parents or legal guardians of the dating violence policy in ours?
I'm sorry, say that again?
The part about informing parents and guardians about the policy?
I thought we had talked about that.
Because if not, it should be in there. Because that's part of the law too.
There is a creation of the Violence Prevention Task
It's
Force.
not, no, this is literally just like, as simple, I think, as annually emailing all the parents and guardians saying this exists, is what the law says.
I saw that.
And it is strongly recommended that school districts provide parents awareness training, but the mandated part is informing them about the policy.
Maybe just put
Oh,
that.
yeah, here it is, reporting responsibilities. The principal of each school shall establish and prominently publicize to students, staff, volunteers, and parents how to report dating violence and how such reports will be acted on. That?
That might satisfy it. I mean, usually this would fall under one of those things we send home with families, sign off that you're aware of these policies.
Or have it in Aspen or something, like,
Yeah.
you wouldn't even have to say, like, you would just say, I was informed that. Right, do you see it, number E?
Yeah, nope, I saw it, yep.
How do we do that currently?
For some things, I do it in Aspen as a parent, like I read something and then I
Check
say
it,
yes.
right, yeah.
It's a little checkbox. I don't know what's current practice. It also, in the state policy, it references middle school and high school up, but then sometimes they reference like parents and guardians in general, like not specific age, and so that was I was like, oh, is it just middle school and high school, or like should elementary school humans be notified of that as well? The way I read it, it's sometimes it means all and sometimes it
Right.
didn't, but I would
Yes,
I would err on the side of all.
We also need to update this for language.
Yes, I noticed that for like him, her, and stuff.
So I'll go back through and do the definitions and make sure that we're covering all points in the statute.
And I'll check.
And I'll research the definitions in the other policy
Going
too to
through
see
that
what the
share, you can
genesis is.
see, Because like some of the
ACB.
discipline stuff, we need to move from here to put into the policy.
Okay.
Because it says it's supposed to be included, so it should be
Mhm.
separate.
Okay, so you'll do the discipline in the forms?
Bless you.
Thank you.
Cough. I don't know.
Cough,
Just
yeah.
need to make sure it
Yeah.
matches.
There really should be a word for that. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
You can
Cough
hear it in
you?
ECB, but-
I was in these classrooms today, there was quite a bit of coughing
That's
going
all.
on.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
that
Yeah.
time
It's,
of year.
yeah, it's a trick.
Okay.
It's a
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story after.
Mhm.
It's not-
The complaint form that's in here, we're not gonna use, because we have complaint forms.
Okay, and you'll give me
Yeah.
one to put in. What else?
On this one?
Yeah.
I don't know, I think I have to, after we do all the things, like we just need to look at it again. Like I think a lot of the stuff when I was reading it was like about either administrative stuff or like I was most concerned about the coordination with ACB and like making sure that that wasn't like, even though I know they're friends, like it's not,
Yeah,
like, I
this-
can't, it has to be separate, it has to be really specific, so I think that was where I wanted it to be a little tighter.
Okay.
So I'll look, I know, I'll
Yep,
review it
okay.
again before we come back.
All right, so I'm going to call it a wrap here because I
Yeah.
know we have another one coming up. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 11th, but I know we have the joint meeting with the town that night. Are people okay with that? Do we want to move it? What do we
I
want
was
to do?
just moving, just in case we're doing preparing
Okay.
in any way.
So can we schedule it while we're all here? Does the 12th work? I know there's asset management on the 14th. We could do the 12th, we could do the 3rd. Actually, Andrew can't do the 12th. How about the 13th? Does the 13th work?
Just December?
Yes.
Yes, the 13th works.
That works for me.
Hmm?
So that works.
Okay, all right.
Yes. I think, yes, I can make that work.
I think
It's a Wednesday though, don't you have things on Wednesdays?
It's starting in January,
Oh.
Wednesday.
Can't wait to wake up.
Rob, we're just wrapping up one meeting, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, we'll be done in 2
It's
seconds.
okay, sorry.
Is there another, you want to suggest a
No,
different day?
it should be okay. I'm trying to think of my kids' schedules.
Do you want to do
It should be
the
good.
18th? Oh, we have a school committee meeting that night. Why are we meeting on Monday? Feels gross. Why
Yeah,
are we
13th
meeting
will
on
work.
I don't know, but
Monday?
it's funny just because that just came up today in the office.
you
Someone
wanna
was
do
like,
the
"Could you be
20th?
able to Monday the 18th?" I'm like, "I must be."
I think we
Okay.
had to move it off of another
Okay.
date.
All right,
It was
so
like the
we're
only
going
one
to say the
available.
13th at 5 o'clock, yes?
It's fine with me.
Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
Second? Okay, thank you very much. Let me
Maybe we'll get this to work.